The dust never settled on Sector 447B. It hung in the air like a judgment suspended in the thin atmosphere of a world that had died twice. Once when its sun began to fade 10,000 cycles ago. And again 3 weeks earlier when Commander Marcus Thane's excavation team punched through the final layer of compressed sediment and found what should have remained buried. Captain Kira Thane stood at the edge of the excavation pit, watching her father's team work in the amber light of portable floods. At 28, she was the youngest fleet captain in Krelith Dominion history. She wore her rank with the easy confidence of someone who had never lost a battle, never questioned an order, never doubted that the universe made sense. That confidence would not survive the week. The structure below was enormous, 50 meters tall, just as wide. A perfect circle of dark metal that seemed to drink light rather than reflect it. The surface was covered in symbols that glowed faintly, with residual power pulsing like a heartbeat that refused to stop after 10 millennia of silence. Marcus Thane was 60 years old, with the kind of weathered face that came from spending more time on dead worlds than living ones. He had led dozens of archaeological expeditions across the Dominion's expanding territories. But Kira could see something different in his posture now. Her father moved around the ancient portal with the careful reverence of a man approaching something holy or something dangerous. Captain Thane, Dr. Elara Nim, approached from the control console they had erected beside the structure. The archaeolinguist was Krelith's finest, specialized in dead languages and abandoned technologies. Her forehands moved in an unconscious pattern of anxiety as she spoke. "You need to see this." Kira descended into the pit, her boots crunching on crystallized mineral deposits. The air grew colder as she approached the portal. Energy signatures her implant reported. Residual power systems. Active monitoring protocols. The structure wasn't just ancient, it was waiting. "We've translated the primary inscription," Elara said, gesturing to the archway. "It's carved in 17 different languages. 17. That's more linguistic diversity than we've ever found at any single site." "They want it to be understood," Marcus said quietly. He stood with his hand against the portal's frame, his fingers tracing symbols that predated Krelith civilization by thousands of cycles. They wanted to make absolutely certain that whoever found these would comprehend the message. Kira looked up at the words carved into the dark metal. Her translator implant processed them instantly, rendering them in modern Krelith. "This gate is sealed by human command. We withdraw to rebuild. We will return. Do not follow. Do not wait. Do not be here when we come back." "Human," Kira repeated. "That's the species from the old databases. The ones who fought in the Devourer War." "The ones who won the Devourer War," Marcus corrected. His voice carried a weight that made Kira uneasy. "The ones who disappeared afterward and were never heard from again." Elara pulled up a holographic display from her datapad. Ancient images flickered in the air, bipedal creatures standing upright on 2 legs. No natural armor, no claws, no visible weapons. Their skin looked soft, vulnerable. By every metric, they appeared to be one of the galaxy's weaker species. "The database files tell a different story," Elara said. She scrolled through military records, battle footage, tactical assessments. The images showed ships of elegant, brutal design, weapons that cracked moons, fleets that moved with mathematical precision. These humans fought for 200 cycles against an enemy that threatened every sentient species in known space. They didn't just survive, they dominated. Kira studied the footage. The human vessels moved like predators, anticipating every maneuver, exploiting every weakness. When the final Devourer hive world fell, it took the human fleet 6 hours to sterilize an entire solar system. "After the war ended, the coalition turned on itself," Marcus said. "Old rivalries, territorial disputes. The humans found themselves fighting former allies, and they kept winning. They won every single engagement." "So why did they leave?" Kira asked. Marcus met her eyes. "That's what scares me. A species doesn't achieve total military dominance and then just walk away. Not unless they had a very good reason. Elara activated another file. A holographic figure materialized above her datapad. A human female, perhaps 40 cycles old by their biological markers. She wore a dark uniform with insignia that suggested high academic or governmental authority. Her expression was calm, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen things she could never unsee. The hologram began to speak. The language was ancient, Krelith, spoken with perfect fluency, but a strange accent that made it sound both familiar and alien. "My name is Dr. Sarah Marlowe," the hologram said. "If you are watching this, it means you have found one of our sealed portals. It means you have read our warnings, and it means I'm sorry to say that you are considering ignoring them." The hologram paused, as if looking directly at Kira across 10,000 cycles of time. "I'm recording this message in the year 37 post-Exodus. Humanity sealed these portals 37 cycles ago. We withdrew through our gateway network to sectors far beyond what you consider known space. We did this because we had become something we could not live with. We had become too efficient at death, too skilled at destruction. We needed time to remember what we were fighting for, instead of simply how to fight." Sarah Marlowe's image gestured and a star map appeared. 3 systems clearly marked, rich with processed metals, rare elements, and established infrastructure. "I am leaving you coordinates to 3 resource-rich systems within our sealed network. Consider this a test. If you colonize these worlds, we will know. We will know that you ignored clear warnings from a civilization that tried very hard to be understood, and we will respond accordingly." The hologram's expression softened slightly. "I hope you don't follow these coordinates. I hope you seal this portal and walk away, because if you don't, you will force us to prove why we carved our warnings in 17 languages across 3 galaxies, and that is a lesson I would spare you if I could." The hologram flickered and vanished. Silence settled over the excavation site. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "Father," Kira said carefully, "this recording is 10,000 cycles old. Even if these humans survived, even if they maintained their technology, they could be anywhere by now. They could have moved on, evolved, fragmented into warring factions. Or they could be exactly where they said they'd be," Marcos replied, waiting, watching, counting. Kira looked at the coordinates still glowing in the holographic display. 3 systems, unclaimed resources, technology that could advance Dominion science by decades. She thought about the High Council, about Councillor Draven Kael's endless push for expansion, about the economic pressures facing their people. "I have to report this," she said. "I know." Marcus placed his hand on her shoulder. "Kira, I've spent 20 cycles trying to warn the Council about these sealed sectors. They've dismissed every report, called me paranoid, conspiracy-minded. But I'm begging you now as your father and not as a colleague. Tell them to seal this portal and walk away." Kira met her father's eyes. She saw fear there. Real deep-rooted fear from a man who had excavated the ruins of 100 dead civilizations and never once looked afraid. "I'll present all the data," she said. "I'll make sure they understand the warnings." Will they listen? Kira didn't answer. She knew the council. She knew how they thought. Ancient warnings from a probably extinct species versus immediate tangible resources. The decision was already made. It had been made the point they detected the portal's energy signature from orbit. The High Council chamber on the Dominion homeworld was a cathedral of political power. Holographic representatives from 50 colony worlds floated in concentric circles around the central dais where 7 councillors sat in seats carved from meteor stone. At the head sat High Councillor Sefan Zir, 70 cycles old, with the patient wisdom of someone who had guided the Dominion through 2 economic collapses and 3 border conflicts. Beside him sat Councillor Draven Kael, 55 cycles ambitious, with the kind of charisma that made people forget to ask difficult questions. Kira stood in the presentation sphere, her holographic briefing hovering around her. She showed them everything. The portal, the 17-language warning, Sarah Marlowe's recorded message, the Devourer war records, the coordinates. When she finished, silence filled the chamber. Counselor Draven spoke first. Captain Thane, we appreciate your thorough report. However, I must ask a critical question. How long ago was this warning carved? 10,000 cycles, Counselor. 10,000 cycles, Draven repeated, letting the words hang in the air. In galactic terms, that is not just ancient history, that is geological time. Civilizations rise and fall in less time than that. Species evolve, devolve, go extinct. The Krelith Dominion itself has only existed for 6,000 cycles. The warning specifically states they would return, Kira said. Yes, a warning carved by a species at the height of military power. But power fades, Captain. Technology degrades. Even the mightiest empires crumble. If these humans still existed with anything approaching their former capabilities, we would have detected them by now. Our deep space surveys show no signs of advanced civilizations in the regions beyond the sealed portals. High Counselor Sephan raised one hand. Counselor Draven makes valid points, but I must express caution. The warning was explicit, and the fact that it was carved in 17 languages suggests they went to great effort to be understood. Or they were desperate, Draven countered. Perhaps they sealed these portals because they were fleeing from something. Perhaps their civilization was collapsing and they needed to consolidate resources. The coordinates they left could be bait for territorial rivals, not a genuine test of our wisdom. With respect, Counselor, Kira interjected, the archaeological evidence suggests otherwise. These portals were sealed deliberately and methodically. The power systems were specifically designed to remain active for tens of thousands of cycles. This was not a species in retreat. This was a species making a calculated decision. Draven smiled, not unkindly, but with the patience of someone explaining reality to an idealistic youth. Captain Thane, your service record is exemplary, but you're a military officer, not a political strategist. Consider the larger context. The Dominion has a growing population, increasing resource demands, and economic pressures from neighboring powers. These three systems could provide rare elements that would revolutionize our energy sector. Infrastructure that would take us centuries to build ourselves, just waiting. Empty. Empty and sealed for a reason, Sephan said quietly. Perhaps the reason died 10,000 cycles ago, and we're letting superstition prevent us from claiming resources that rightfully belong to whoever is bold enough to take them. Draven stood addressing the full council now. I propose we activate the portal and send a survey expedition, a limited mission, purely exploratory. If we detect any signs of active human presence, we withdraw immediately. But we cannot allow ancient warnings to paralyze us when our people need resources now. The debate lasted for hours. Councillors argued, data was presented, historical precedents were examined. Kira stood in the presentation sphere, watching democracy unfold like a slow-motion disaster. In the end, the vote was 7-6 in favor of Draven's proposal. Marcus Thane watched the vote tally appear on his terminal screen and felt something break inside him. For 20 cycles, he had tried to warn them. 20 cycles of reports, presentations, earnest pleas to anyone who would listen. They had tolerated him because he was brilliant at finding ancient technology, but they had never truly believed him. Now they would pay for that disbelief. He composed a message to his daughter. Kira, I know you did everything you could, but you need to understand something. I've studied humanity's archaeological record for 30 cycles. I've read every fragment of their history we've recovered. They didn't make idle threats. They didn't issue warnings they wouldn't enforce. When they sealed these portals, they meant it. He sent the message and turned back to his research, trying to find any scrap of information that might prepare them for what was coming. The portal activation happened 3 weeks later. Kira stood on the bridge of her survey vessel, the Stellar Eye, watching through the observation dome as Dominion engineers brought ancient technology back to life. The portal structure glowed with increasing intensity energy patterns, cascading across its surface in waves of blue-white light. Space itself began to twist and fold, reality bending around the gateway. And then, with a sound that registered simultaneously as thunder and absolute silence, the portal opened. Through the circular frame, stars appeared that had never been visible from Sector 447b, a different region of space entirely thousands of light cycles away, accessible instantly through technology the Dominion could barely comprehend, let alone replicate. Preliminary readings are stable, reported Lieutenant Ren Thane from the sensor station. At 22, Kira's younger brother had inherited their father's curiosity and their mother's fearlessness. Energy signature nominal. No hostile contacts detected. The portal is operational and secure. Kira allowed herself a small smile. Well, little brother, looks like father might have been wrong after all. Ren glanced back at her. Is that a first in recorded history? Be respectful of your elders, Kira said, but she was grinning. All ships, this is Captain Thane. We are proceeding through the portal on my mark. Maintain formation. Weapons to standby status. Science teams begin recording everything. The Stellar Eye, flanked by 19 Dominion warships, glided through the portal. For a moment that felt both instantaneous and eternal, Kira existed in two places at once. She could see both the dead world of Sector 447b and the new system ahead, superimposed like a double exposure. Then they were through. The system on the other side was paradise. 3 habitable planets, already terraformed with breathable atmospheres and stable ecosystems. Orbital infrastructure that had been dormant for millennia but remained structurally sound. Asteroid fields rich with processed metals neatly catalogued and automated mining networks, and absolutely no signs of current habitation. The survey data flooded in over the next 10 days. Every probe, every scan, every analysis showed the same thing: these systems had been prepared for colonization and then abandoned. The humans had left everything behind when they sealed the portals. Reports went back to the High Council. Within 20 days, authorization came through for full colonization efforts. Within 40 days, the first civilian transports began moving through the portal. Within 60 days, Colony Prime, the largest settlement on the first habitable world, had a population of 70,000. Ren Thane was among them. He had requested immediate transfer to the Colony Engineering course, eager to study and restore human infrastructure. He sent his sister daily updates, excited messages about fusion reactors that ran on principles Krelitz science had never conceived, about water purification systems that required no maintenance, about buildings that had stood vacant for 10,000 cycles without a single structural failure. They were incredible builders, Ren's message said. Everything is over-engineered to an almost obsessive degree. Redundant systems on top of redundant systems. It's like they were preparing for a war that would last forever. Kira read that message 3 times, feeling something cold settle in her chest. Preparations for a war that would last forever. 10 cycles after the first portal activation, the Dominion had established 17 colonies across the 3 systems. Over 1.2 million citizens had relocated, drawn by economic opportunities and the promise of a new frontier. The Dominion economy boomed as resources flowed back through the portal. Draven Kael became a hero, praised for his vision and courage. Marcus Thane withdrew to a small research station on the edge of Dominion space. His warnings had been proven false, or so everyone believed. The humans were gone. The galaxy had moved on. But Marcus continued to study. He had found something in the human database, a fragment of text that kept him awake at night. It was part of a document called the Exodus Accords, and it contained a single line that made his blood run cold. Sealed sectors are to remain empty until Phase 3 reclamation is initiated. Any species establishing colonies within sealed space after the passage of 10,000 cycles will be considered in violation of treaty, and all established protocols will be enacted. Phase 3 reclamation. Marcus had found no other references to what that meant, but he understood enough to know it was coming. He sent messages to Kira, to Ren, to the High Council, warning them that the humans had left detailed provisions for exactly this scenario. That the absence of human presence didn't mean absence of human monitoring. That somewhere beyond the edges of known space, they were watching. No one listened. The colonies were thriving. The economy was booming. Ancient warnings seemed increasingly irrelevant in the face of tangible prosperity. Until the night a patrol vessel detected a ship at the outer edge of the colonial system. Lieutenant Commander Vera Kos was on routine scanner duty when her instruments registered the contact. At first she thought it was a sensor ghost, a glitch in the detection grid. The signature was too small to be a capital ship, but too fast to be a civilian transport. She refined the scan. The contact resolved into a vessel unlike anything in Dominion databases. Sleek, angular, built with a design philosophy that emphasized function over aesthetics. The ship moved between the outer planets with impossible agility, performing scans, taking readings, conducting what was clearly a methodical survey operation. Vera opened a comm channel across all standard frequencies. Unknown vessel, this is Dominion Patrol Command. Please identify yourself and state your purpose in this system. The alien ship did not respond. Vera tried again, cycling through every known communication protocol. The ship ignored every hail. It continued its survey operations, moving from planet to planet with practiced efficiency. Then it began to accelerate. Vera watched her instruments in disbelief as the unknown vessel's velocity climbed past anything Dominion ships could achieve. It reached 0.9 light speed, 0.95, 0.99. And then it jumped to faster than light travel using a drive system that left no conventional signature. Before it vanished, the ship did one final thing. It transmitted a tight beam message toward the galactic core. The message was brief, encrypted, and sent with enough power to punch through interstellar space. Vera's communications array couldn't decode it, but they could track its destination. The message was sent to a region far beyond the portal network, deep into unexplored space. Someone out there now knew about the Krellith presence in the sealed sectors. The report reached Kira's desk within hours. She stared at the sensor logs, at the ship's impossible performance characteristics, at the design philosophy that matched perfectly with ancient human engineering principles from the database. She sent an immediate message to Marcus. Her father's response came back within minutes. Just 3 words. They were counting. Kira sat in her ready room aboard the Stellar Eye, looking at the data and feeling the first real stirrings of fear. The ship had performed a methodical survey. It had documented every colony, every ship, every military installation. It had counted their forces and capabilities, and then it had reported back. She accessed the ancient human database one more time, pulling up military doctrine files that she'd skimmed months ago but never fully analyzed. There was a section on reconnaissance protocols. Standard procedures for preliminary operations in hostile or contested space. Phase 1 Scout. Perform detailed surveillance. Document all military and civilian assets. Assess technological capability and tactical doctrine. Phase 2. Diplomatic warning. Provide clear opportunity for peaceful resolution. Establish consequences for non-compliance. Phase 3. Forceful reclamation. Execute all necessary measures to restore territorial integrity. Kira felt her hands start to shake. The scout ship had just completed Phase 1. 3 cycles later at Portal Station 7, the outermost Dominion installation in the colonial network alarms began to sound. Sensors detected massive gravity signatures at the edge of the system. 5 vessels emerging from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, appearing in space with the kind of mathematical precision that suggested either telepathic coordination or computer systems far beyond Krellith capabilities. The duty officer stared at his display as the signatures resolved into actual ships. Angular, efficient, built with the same design philosophy as the scout vessel. But where the Scout had been small and fast, these ships were capital-class warships, each one bristling with weapon systems and surrounded by defensive screens that registered as miniature suns on the energy detectors. The 5 ships took up positions that controlled every exit vector from the system. It was a textbook military maneuver executed with flawless timing. No ship could leave without passing through their firing lines. The officer reached for the emergency comm with shaking hands. This is Portal Station 7 to Dominion Command. We have unknown contacts. 5 capital ships. They've established a blockade formation. Configuration matches ancient human database. Request immediate instructions. The response came back after an agonizing delay. Station 7 hold position. Do not engage. Attempting to establish communication. The 5 human vessels held their formation waiting. Patient. Certain. And then a communication request came through on all frequencies. The transmission contained audio, video and text in perfect modern Krelith with absolutely no accent or translation errors. A human face appeared on every screen in the system, male perhaps 38 cycles old by biological markers. He wore a dark uniform with rank insignia that suggested high military authority. His expression was calm professional, completely devoid of anger or aggression. When he spoke, his voice carried the absolute certainty of someone stating objective facts about reality. I am Captain Garrett Ashford of the United Earth Coalition vessel Valiant. You are in violation of sealed space as established by the Exodus Accords, ratified 10,000 cycles ago. You have been provided warnings in 17 languages. You have been given coordinates as a test of your judgment. You have chosen to establish permanent colonies in territory explicitly placed under human jurisdiction. Ashford paused. His expression never changed, but something in his eyes suggested he was choosing his next words very carefully. You have 30 standard hours to evacuate all personnel and equipment through the portal. After that time, any remaining presence will be considered hostile, and we will be forced to enact Phase 3 protocols. This is the only communication you will receive. The choice is yours. The transmission ended. Across the colonial network in military command centers and civilian settlements on capital ships and mining outposts, Krelith citizens looked at each other in shock. For 10 cycles, they had convinced themselves the warnings were empty, that the humans were gone or weakened or irrelevant. The 5 ships, hanging in space, powerful and patient and utterly confident, proved otherwise. On Colony Prime, Ren Thane stood at the window of his engineering quarters looking up at the night sky. Behind him, his comm terminal blinked with an urgent message from his sister. Kira's voice was tight with controlled fear. Ren, request immediate evacuation to the nearest military transport. Do not wait for official orders. Get to the portal. Get out. Please. Ren looked around his quarters at the human technology he'd spent cycles studying and beginning to understand. At the civilization these beings had built and then walked away from because they had judged themselves too dangerous to remain. He understood now. The over-engineering, the redundant systems, the preparation for eternal war. These humans hadn't built cities. They had built fortresses. They hadn't created homes. They had created fallback positions. They had always known they might need to come back. Ren grabbed his emergency pack and ran for the transport terminal, his sister's warning echoing in his mind. Aboard the Stellar Eye, Kira stood on the bridge and looked at the tactical display. 5 human ships, 20 Dominion warships in the immediate area. On paper, the odds favored the Dominion 4-1. But Kira remembered the scout ship's impossible speed. She remembered Sarah Marlowe's warning. She remembered her father's fear. Captain, her tactical officer reported, Dominion Command is ordering all ships to combat readiness. Councillor Draven is refusing to evacuate. He's demanding we hold our ground and demonstrate Dominion sovereignty. Of course he is, Kira said quietly. She opened a private channel to her father's research station. Marcus answered immediately, his aged face filling her screen. He looked like he'd been crying. Kira, I know, father, you were right about everything. I'm sorry we didn't listen. Marcus shook his head. I don't care about being right. I care about you and your brother surviving. Please get Ren out first. Promise me. Kira swallowed hard. I promise. They looked at each other across the vast distance, a father and daughter who had wasted too much time arguing about warnings that should have been heeded. I love you, Marcus said. I love you too, father. The channel closed. Kira turned back to her bridge crew and began issuing orders. She would save as many people as she could. She would get Ren to safety. She would do her duty. But she knew with absolute certainty that the Dominion had just made the worst mistake in its 6,000 cycle history. In the void beyond Portal Station 7, the 5 human ships maintained their formation. Inside the bridge of the Valiant, Captain Garrett Ashford watched the countdown timer. 30 hours. He had read the reports from the scout vessel. He knew about Commander Marcus Thane, about his decades of warnings, about his desperate attempts to make his people understand. One man crying in the wilderness ignored by everyone. Ashford made a note to remember that name. If this went badly, if Phase 3 had to be executed in full, he would make sure Marcus Thane's warnings were recorded in the historical accounts. Someone should remember that Juan Krelith had understood. The timer continued its inexorable countdown. The choice had been made the moment the first colonists stepped through the portal 10 cycles ago. Everything since then was just the galaxy learning consequences. On the dead world of Sector 447b, the ancient portal glowed with activity as ships began streaming through in both directions. Colonists evacuating, military forces reinforcing, the Dominion scrambling to respond to a threat they had convinced themselves was impossible. And carved in the portal's archway, still glowing faintly after 10,000 cycles, the warning remained. Do not be hit air when we come back. They had been warned. They had not listened. And now the humans had returned. The 30-hour deadline burned away like oxygen in vacuum. Councillor Draven Kael stood in the High Council chambers surrounded by holographic projections of panicked colony administrators and military commanders. His carefully constructed political empire was fracturing in real time, and he responded the only way he knew how, with defiance wrapped in rhetoric. We will not be intimidated by ghost ships and ancient threats. Draven declared, his voice carrying across every official channel in the Dominion. For 10 cycles, our citizens have built lives in these systems. They have families, homes, businesses. We will not abandon them based on ultimatums from a species that disappeared 10,000 cycles ago. High Councillor Sefanzir sat in his meteor stone chair, looking older than his 70 cycles. Councillor Draven, we have confirmation that these vessels match ancient human design specifications. The scout ship demonstrated capabilities far beyond our technology. Perhaps wisdom lies in cowardice, Draven interrupted, in surrendering our sovereignty the moment someone makes demands. We have 20 capital ships in the immediate area. Reinforcements can arrive within days. The mathematics favor us, Councillor. Mathematics, Sefan said quietly, do not account for variables we do not understand. But the vote had already shifted. Fear and pride made dangerous partners, and the Council chose pride. The order went out to all Dominion forces. Hold position. Demonstrate resolve. Prepare for potential hostile action. Captain Rylan Voss received the orders aboard his flagship Dominion's Pride. At 42 cycles, he was one of the youngest fleet commanders in Krelith history, promoted through a combination of tactical brilliance and political connections to Draven's faction. He had fought pirates, border skirmishes, and one brief war with the Ven Collective. His record was unblemished. He read the orders 3 times, feeling something cold settle in his gut. Tactical, he said to his bridge crew, what's our current disposition? 20 capital ships, sir. The Dominion's Pride, Sovereignty, Vigilance, and 17 others. Full weapons load. Shields at maximum. We have the human vessels outnumbered 4-1. And their capabilities unknown, sir. The scout ship demonstrated faster than light speeds we can't match and drive signatures we can't identify. These 5 vessels are capital class, significantly larger than the scout. Energy signatures read as anomalous. Anomalous how? The tactical officer hesitated. Sir, their power output is reading higher than our entire fleet combined. But that can't be accurate. It must be some kind of sensor distortion. Rylan looked at the display showing the 5 human ships holding position at the system's edge. They hadn't moved since delivering their ultimatum. They simply waited with the patience of celestial objects. Captain Voss, his communications officer, interrupted. We're receiving a priority transmission from the Stellar Eye. Captain Thane is requesting permission to speak with you privately. Rylan knew Kira Thane, young, brilliant, and frustratingly principled. Her father was the archaeologist who had spent decades warning about sealed sectors. The council had dismissed Marcus Thane as paranoid. Rylan had dismissed him too. He was beginning to suspect they had all made a terrible mistake. Put her through. Private channel. Kira's face appeared on his command screen. She looked exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept since the human ships arrived. Captain Voss, I'm requesting permission to attempt direct communication with the human vessels. Denied. High Council orders are to maintain current posture and await their next move. Sir, with respect, we've studied their historical records. When humans issue ultimatums, they mean them. They're not bluffing. They're giving us one last chance to avoid what comes next. Your father's research has made you cautious, Captain. I understand, but we can't set precedent for abandoning Dominion territory every time someone makes threats. Captain Ashford didn't make threats. He stated consequences. There's a difference. Rylan leaned back in his command chair. Captain Thane, I've read the same files you have. Yes, the humans were formidable 10,000 cycles ago, but civilizations change. Technology advances or decays. For all we know, these 5 ships represent their entire remaining fleet. Perhaps they're hoping we'll evacuate based on their ancient reputation because they can't actually back up their demands. And if you're wrong, then we'll adapt. That's what the Dominion does. We're survivors, Captain. Kira's expression hardened. Sir, my brother is on Colony Prime with 70,000 other civilians. If this goes wrong, it won't. Trust in our training and our capabilities. Voss out. The channel closed. Rylan turned back to his tactical display, pushing down the small voice in his head that sounded disturbingly like Marcus Thane's warnings. The 30-hour deadline expired at 0400 hours Dominion Standard Time. For exactly 3 minutes, nothing happened. The human ships maintained their formation. The Dominion fleet held position. The universe held its breath. Then, Captain Garrett Ashford's voice returned calm and professional as before. Krelith Dominion forces, you have chosen not to evacuate. We acknowledge your decision. Phase 3 protocols are now in effect. All Dominion military vessels are designated hostile. You have the opportunity to surrender and withdraw peacefully. This is your final chance to avoid casualties. Aboard Dominion's Pride, Rylan's tactical officer reported, Sir, they're moving. The 5 human ships broke formation with synchronized precision. They accelerated toward the Dominion fleet at speeds that made the sensor readings spike into alert ranges. The distance between the forces began shrinking impossibly fast. All ships combat formation Theta 7. Rylan ordered, target the lead vessel. Coordinate fire on my mark. Show them Dominion strength. 20 capital ships maneuvered into attack position. Weapons systems came online. Targeting computers locked onto the approaching human vessels. Everything Krelith military science had developed over 6,000 cycles of civilization focused on those 5 ships. Fire, Rylan commanded. The Dominion fleet unleashed everything simultaneously. Energy beams capable of cracking moons, missiles with antimatter warheads, kinetic projectiles accelerated to near light speed. The combined firepower could have sterilized the planet's surface in minutes. The salvo crossed the distance in seconds, a wave of destruction that lit up every sensor in the system. And then it hit the human ships. The energy beams struck translucent barriers that appeared around each vessel and simply stopped. The beams didn't reflect or dissipate. They just ended as if hitting a wall between dimensions. The missiles detonated against the same barriers with flashes of brilliant light that faded without leaving a mark. The kinetic projectiles hit the shields, and their mass converted to light, absorbed by some principle of physics Krelith scientists had never conceived. Not a single shot penetrated. Impossible. Ryland's tactical officer whispered, "All weapons continuous fire." Ryland ordered, hearing the edge of desperation in his own voice. "Concentrate on a single target. Overwhelm their defenses." The Dominion fleet poured fire into one human ship for 45 seconds of sustained barrage, enough energy to destroy a small moon. The human vessel sat in the center of the firestorm, untouched its shields, absorbing everything without visible strain. Then the humans fired back. What happened next took 17 minutes. It would be studied in military academies for generations, not as a battle, but as a demonstration. A surgical lesson in the difference between fighting and dominance. The human weapons operated on principles Krellith science couldn't immediately explain. Some beams passed through Dominion shields as if they weren't there, striking armor and hull with devastating precision. Others caused catastrophic systems failures without visible damage, as if reaching inside ships and simply turning off critical components. Still others manipulated gravity itself, crushing sections of vessels or tearing off weapons arrays with invisible hands. The humans didn't destroy randomly. They targeted with horrifying accuracy. They hit weapon systems, first stripping ships of offensive capability, then engines eliminating mobility, then shields leaving vessels helpless but intact. They disabled rather than destroyed, fighting with the efficiency of surgeons and the restraint of judges. The dreadnought Sovereignty exploded in the first 90 seconds, its reactor going critical, after a human beam punched through 3 decks to hit its containment core. 200 crew killed instantly. The cruiser Vigilance lost all power in under a minute, drifting helplessly as its crew evacuated to escape pods. The humans let every pod launch unmolested. The destroyer Pride of Kellan tried to ram one of the human ships in a desperate final maneuver. A gravity pulse from the human vessel caught it mid-acceleration and redirected its momentum harmlessly into empty space, spinning it like a discarded toy. Kira watched from the stellar eye, her fighter squadron on standby but helpless to engage. She could see her pilots' faces on her tactical display. Young officers who had trained their entire lives for combat, now realizing their training meant nothing against this enemy. "Captain," her wing commander said, voice shaking. "What do we do?" Kira wanted to order an attack, wanted to fight, but she remembered her father's words, remembered Sarah Marlowe's warning. These humans had fought a 200-cycle war against an enemy that threatened the entire galaxy. They had won by becoming the best killers in known space, and then they had spent 10,000 cycles learning restraint. "Hold position," Kira ordered. "Do not engage, that's an order." "But Captain, look at them," Kira snapped. "They're not fighting, they're teaching, and the lesson is that we never had a chance." On the bridge of the Valiant, Captain Garrett Ashford watched the engagement with professional detachment. His ships moved through the Dominion formation like predators among prey, anticipating every maneuver, countering every tactic. The centuries of human military doctrine, refined through the longest war in galactic history, made this less a battle than an exercise. "Minimal force protocols are in effect," he reminded his weapons officers. "Disable only. Preserve life where possible." "Aye, Captain. The Krellith flagship is attempting to maneuver for firing position. Disable its engines. Leave life support intact." The Dominion's Pride shuddered as targeted beams struck its engine array. Raylan felt the deck lurch beneath him as power systems failed in sequence. Damage reports flooded his board, engines offline, weapons offline, shields failing. But life support remained stable. Emergency systems maintained atmosphere and gravity. They weren't being destroyed, they were being neutralized. "All ships," Ryland transmitted, his voice heavy with defeat. "Cease fire. I repeat, cease fire and prepare to surrender." Of the 20 Dominion capital ships, 3 had been destroyed, completely catastrophic reactor failures or ammunition detonations that the humans couldn't prevent. 10 were disabled, drifting without power, but with their crews alive. 7 had managed to limp away to minimum safe distance. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. Human casualties 0, Krelith casualties 120 dead, 800 wounded, 18 ships neutralized or destroyed. It was the most one-sided engagement in Krelith military history. Ashford's voice returned to all channels. Dominion forces. Hostilities are concluded. Medical assistance is available to wounded vessels. You will be escorted to the portal and allowed to return to Krelith space. We take no prisoners. We seek no retribution. We simply require your withdrawal from sealed space. Then on a private channel to the Stellar Eye. Captain Thane, Kira Thane, please respond on this frequency. Kira's hands shook as she opened the channel. This is Captain Thane. Captain, my records indicate your brother, Lieutenant Ren Thane, is currently on Colony Prime. He's alive and unharmed. I'm assigning one of our transports to expedite his evacuation. As a courtesy to your father, who tried very hard to prevent this. Kira felt tears sting her eyes. You know about my father. Commander Marcus Thane sent us 47 messages over 20 cycles. Warnings, please, translations of our own protocols. He understood what we were and what we would do. He was the only Krelith who listened. Tell him I'm sorry his warnings weren't heeded. And tell him the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet remembers those who speak truth even when no one listens. The channel closed. Kira sat in her command chair, overwhelmed by the complexity of what she just witnessed. The humans had destroyed a Dominion fleet in minutes. And then they'd shown mercy, offered medical aid, personally ensured her brother's safety because her father had tried to warn them. This wasn't conquest. This was something she didn't have words for. The news of the defeat reached the High Council within hours. Carefully edited footage showed Dominion ships being dismantled by weapons they couldn't counter, by technology they couldn't understand. It showed human vessels moving with impossible speed and precision. Most disturbing were the final shots of disabled ships drifting in space, their crews alive but helpless. The humans had proven they could destroy the Krelith fleet whenever they wanted. They had chosen mercy instead, and somehow that made them infinitely more terrifying. Panic spread through the 17 colonies. Families began evacuating immediately, not waiting for official orders. Ships crowded the portal, desperate to escape. High Councillor Sefan called an emergency session of the full council. He didn't waste time with recriminations or blame. The situation was clear. We have 2 choices. Sefan said, his aged voice steady despite the crisis. Evacuate peacefully and accept the terms of a treaty we didn't know existed, or attempt to hold our colonies with military force, which we've now proven we cannot do. We should contact our allies, Draven said, but even he sounded defeated. The Ven Collective, the Thor Hierarchy, the Osan Republic. Together we could field hundreds of warships against 5 human ships that destroyed 20 of ours in 17 minutes. Sefan shook his head. Councillor Draven, your ambition has led us to disaster. But I will not compound that disaster by leading more young people to their deaths. But Draven wasn't done. Over the next 20 days, he contacted every allied civilization in the sector. He painted pictures of human aggression, of territorial expansion that would threaten everyone's interests. He warned that if the humans reclaimed these sectors, they might expand further into known space. Fear and greed proved persuasive. The Ven Collective had established mining operations alongside the Krelith. The Thor Hierarchy had research outposts studying human technology. The Osan Republic had sent 10,000 colonists to the habitable worlds. They all had investments to protect. And together they had numbers. Within 20 days, a coalition of 4 civilizations assembled the largest military force in known space. 300 warships representing 4 different species gathered at the primary portal. Ven cruisers with their distinctive tripod hulls. Thor dreadnoughts heavily armored and bristling with weapons. Osan carriers deploying swarms of fighters. And Krelith capital ships, their crews determined to redeem their earlier defeat. Councillor Draven took personal command of the combined fleet aboard the flagship Dominion's Glory. He saw this as his chance for redemption. 300 ships against 5. The mathematics were undeniable. Kira watched the fleet assemble with growing horror. She had tried to resign her commission after the first battle, but her request was denied. She was ordered to join the combined fleet as an advisor on human tactics. Her squadron of fighters, reduced to 12 survivors from the original 60, was absorbed into a Ven carrier group. Her brother Ren had been evacuated safely. Just as Ashford promised, he was back on the Dominion homeworld, now sending her desperate messages. "Big sis, please don't go back there. Please. They'll kill everyone." But she couldn't refuse orders, and part of her still hoped that she could somehow prevent complete disaster. The combined fleet crossed through the portal in waves. 300 warships deployed into defensive formations around the Krelith colonies. Sensor networks were established throughout the occupied systems. Fighter squadrons flew constant patrols. Every ship stood at battle stations ready for the human response. Draven stood on the command deck of Dominion's Glory, watching the deployment with satisfaction. The sheer scale of the force was overwhelming. Surely the humans would see reason. Surely they would negotiate rather than fight. High Counselor Sephan had made one final plea before the fleet departed, quoting from Marcus Thane's research from the ancient human database. He had argued that the Dominion was repeating the same mistakes that led to the first defeat, assuming they understood human capabilities based on limited information. But Draven had dismissed these concerns. 300 ships was a force that demanded respect. The combined fleet waited. Days passed with no sign of human vessels. Draven began to believe his gamble had worked. The humans had seen the military build-up and decided that retaking the sectors wasn't worth the cost. On the 7th day, the outermost sensors detected something. The readings made no sense initially. The technician monitoring the display thought there was a malfunction. The gravity signatures were so massive they resembled the stellar phenomena rather than ships. But as the data resolved, the truth became clear. Ships were emerging from faster-than-light travel at the system's edge. Dozens of them. Hundreds. The sensors kept detecting new contacts, each emergence precisely coordinated with the others. The command deck fell silent as the tactical display uprotated contact after contact, appearing on the screens. 147 capital ships, each one larger than the heaviest dreadnought in the coalition fleet. Surrounding these massive vessels were over 1,200 smaller ships, cruisers, destroyers, frigates. And as they watched, the larger ships began launching fighters. Clouds of small craft emerged from hangar bays. The fighter count climbed into the thousands, then tens of thousands. And still more ships kept arriving, jumping into the system in perfect formation. Draven stared at the display, watching his certainties shatter like glass. This wasn't a fleet. This was an armada capable of conquering entire galactic sectors. Every ship showed power readings far beyond anything the coalition possessed. Their formation was mathematically perfect, showing coordination that required computer systems of terrifying sophistication. The human fleet filled the sensor screens, and still more contacts appeared. A communication request came from the largest human vessel. The ship was beyond massive. It made even Dominion's Glory look like an escort craft. It was less a warship and more a mobile fortress, bristling with weapons and surrounded by defensive screens that registered as small suns on the energy detectors. Draven accepted the transmission with shaking hands. A human appeared on the screen wearing a dark uniform with a rank insignia that marked him as someone of supreme authority. He looked perhaps 55 cycles old, with silver hair and eyes that had seen things Draven couldn't imagine. When he spoke, his voice carried the same calm professionalism as Ashford's, but with an added weight of absolute authority. "I am Admiral Thaddeus Corbin, commanding the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet of the Unite Earth Coalition. Counselor Draven Kyle, I recognize you from our intelligence briefings. This communication will be brief. You were warned 10,000 cycles ago when we sealed these portals. Captain Ashford warned you again 28 days ago. You have chosen to ignore both warnings and have assembled a military force in violation of sealed space. This is unacceptable. Draven tried to speak, but Corbin continued without pause. You will have 10 standard days to evacuate all personnel and equipment from the sealed sectors. After that time, we will reclaim our territory by force. We have brought the full strength of the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet to demonstrate that resistance is futile. You face approximately 1,400 human military vessels. We have 6 more fleets of similar size deployed across our territories. Your 300 ships, while impressive by your standards, are not a meaningful obstacle. Corbin's expression never changed as he delivered this message. There was no anger, no satisfaction. He spoke like someone reading technical specifications. I suggest you examine your tactical situation carefully, Counselor. You have lost before this engagement even begins. The only question is, how many of your people die before you accept that reality? I hope for their sake that you choose wisdom. Admiral Corbin out. The transmission ended. On the bridge of Dominion's glory, in command centers across the Coalition fleet, in civilian settlements on 17 colony worlds, the realization settled like a death sentence. They hadn't fought the human fleet. They had fought a patrol group. 5 ships out of over 1,400. And those 5 ships had destroyed 20 Krelith capital ships in 17 minutes. Kira sat in her fighter cockpit strapped into her launch cradle aboard the Ven carrier and felt something break inside her chest. She accessed her father's research files one more time, pulling up the sections on human military doctrine she had skimmed before but never truly absorbed. There was a fragment from something called the Doctrine of Overwhelming Response. When treaty violations occur, response must be proportional to the violation's scale, but decisive enough to prevent repetition. Project sufficient force to make resistance obviously futile. Minimize casualties through demonstration of unstoppable power. The humans hadn't sent everything they had. They had sent enough to make the point clear. They could have destroyed the Coalition fleet from the moment they arrived. Instead, they were giving Draven 10 days to make the right choice. It was mercy disguised as overwhelming force. Kira opened a channel to her squadron, the 12 pilots who had survived the first battle. Listen to me carefully. When the fighting starts, and it will start, because Draven won't surrender, I want you to eject immediately. Don't try to be heroes. Hit your ejection systems and pray the humans honor their pattern of taking no prisoners. Understood? But Captain, that's an order. Your job is to survive this stupidity and tell people what happened here. Someone has to remember. She thought about sending a final message to her father, but couldn't find the words. Instead, she composed a message to Ren. Little brother, find father's research. All of it. Compile it. Publish it. Make sure every school, every military academy, every government office in the Dominion has access to it. Because Dad tried to save us and we didn't listen. Don't let his warnings be forgotten. She encrypted the message and set it to Ottosen if her fighter's life signs went offline. Then she waited for Counselor Draven to make his final fatal mistake. It took Draven 3 days to make his decision. 3 days of consultations with allied commanders, debates with his advisory council, and calculations of odds that didn't account for the fundamental problem you can't negotiate with mathematics. On the morning of the 4th day, he gave the order. All coalition forces, this is Supreme Commander Draven Kyle. We will not surrender our sovereignty to intimidation, regardless of the force arrayed against us. We will demonstrate that 300 united ships fighting for their homes and their freedom cannot be dismissed. Prepare for engagement. For our colonies, for our people, for the future of free civilizations we fight. It was a stirring speech. It would have been inspiring if it wasn't completely delusional. The coalition fleet advanced toward the human formation in textbook battle array. 300 ships organized by species with clear command hierarchies and established tactical doctrines. The humans didn't move. They simply waited. When the coalition fleet came within weapons range, Draven gave the order to fire. 300 warships unleashed everything they had simultaneously. The combined firepower was staggering enough to crack several planets, enough to sterilize entire moons. Energy beams, missiles, kinetic weapons, Exotic radiation, gravity pulses, and every form of destructive technology four civilizations had developed. The barrage filled space with light and fury, and then it hit the human defensive screens. The humans had clearly studied every aspect of the coalition fleet during their approach. They knew the capabilities of each ship type. They understood the tactics of each species. They had identified command structures and communication networks. Now they exploited every weakness with surgical precision. The first wave of human fire targeted command ships and fleet coordination vessels. Within minutes, the coalition's unified command structure collapsed into chaos. The Krelith ships tried to maintain formation, but the Ven vessels panicked and broke ranks. The Tor attempted aggressive maneuvers that left them exposed. The Osan ships tried to retreat, creating confusion in the rear formations. The humans fragmented the coalition fleet within the first hour, dividing the forces and destroying them piece by piece. Each species fought alone, unable to coordinate with their allies, picked apart by human task forces that moved with practiced efficiency. What followed was not a battle. It was a systematic demonstration. The humans fought like they had done this 1,000 times before. Every human ship seemed to know exactly where every other human ship would be at any moment. Their firing patterns interlocked into zones of absolute lethality that no coalition ship could survive. They moved faster, shot straighter, and anticipated every move the coalition made. But the most terrifying aspect remained the restraint. Despite their overwhelming firepower, the humans continued to target weapons and propulsion systems first. They disabled ships rather than destroying them. Life pods that ejected from damaged vessels were allowed to escape. Coalition installations that surrendered were surrounded and given protection. The humans fought like they were following strict rules of engagement, even while systematically dismantling everything the coalition had brought. Kira launched with her squadron when the Ven carrier came under attack. Her 12 fighters formed up and accelerated toward the nearest human vessel, a destroyer-class ship that was methodically disabling Ven cruisers. They got within firing range for approximately 8 seconds. The human destroyer deployed countermeasures that Kira's sensors couldn't even classify. Her targeting computer simply stopped working. Her weapons went offline. Her flight controls became sluggish. Then the destroyer fired a single pulse that disabled her engine without destroying her fighter. The pulse was so precisely calibrated, it shut down her propulsion while leaving life support communications and ejection systems intact. All fighters eject, Kira ordered. Eject now. Her canopy blew off and the ejection system fired. Kira tumbled through vacuum in her emergency pod, watching through the transparent shell as the battle unfolded around her. She saw Dominion's glory lose power and begin drifting. She saw the massive Tor dreadnought hammer of righteousness split in half. She saw Ven carriers deploying fighter swarms that were systematically disabled by human point defense systems. And she saw human vessels moving through the chaos with absolute confidence, fighting not like conquerors but like teachers delivering a brutal lesson. The engagement lasted 15 days, not because the fighting was prolonged, but because the humans took their time methodically processing each sector of the occupied space. They would surround a system, disable all military vessels, offer evacuation to civilian installations, then move to the next system. They didn't rush, they didn't make mistakes. They simply executed their protocols with mechanical efficiency. By day 15, every coalition ship had been neutralized or destroyed. 300 warships representing 4 civilizations, and their best tactical thinking reduced to drifting wreckage or abandoned hulks. Final casualty count coalition forces: 220 ships destroyed or disabled, 4,800 dead, 12,000 wounded. Human forces: 0 casualties, 0 ships damaged. It wasn't even close. In the aftermath, as human vessels surrounded the 17 colony worlds and began coordinating massive civilian evacuations, Kira floated in her emergency pod and waited for pickup. She had been drifting for 6 hours, watching the human fleet move with purpose through the wreckage of coalition ambitions. A human transport approached her pod. its hull marked with medical insignia. A voice came through her pod's emergency channel, speaking perfect Krelith. Captain Kira Thane, this is UEC Medical Transport Mercy. We're here to retrieve you. You're safe. No harm will come to you. The transport's bay door opened, and Kira's pod was pulled inside. As atmosphere flooded the bay, she released the safety harness with shaking hands. A human in medical uniform approached. Captain Thane, I'm Dr. James Caldwell. Are you injured? No, Kira said, her voice hoarse. No, I'm physically fine. Your brother Ren asked me to tell you he's worried about you. We evacuated him safely as promised. He's been sending messages every hour, asking if we found you yet. Kira felt tears start unstoppable. You kept him safe. Of course, he's a civilian non-combatant. And Captain Ashford gave his word to your father. The doctor helped her stand. Let's get you checked out medically. Then Admiral Corbin wants to speak with you. After the medical check, Kira was escorted to a small conference room where a holographic communication system waited. The system activated and Admiral Thaddeus Corbin's image appeared. He studied her for a long moment. Captain Thane, Kira, I've read Captain Ashford's reports about you, and I've read every message your father sent us over 20 cycles. You come from a family that values truth over comfortable lies. That's rare. Admiral, please let me finish. You're going to be released along with all other surviving coalition personnel. We're taking no prisoners. We're seeking no reparations. We simply require the evacuation of sealed space. But before you return to Krelith space, I want you to understand something. The hologram shifted, showing human territory far beyond the sealed sectors. Star systems by the thousands. Shipyards producing vessels in numbers that made the Third Expeditionary Fleet look modest. Populations in the trillions. This is a fraction of human space, Corbin said. We span multiple galaxies. We have resources you can't imagine, and technology you wouldn't believe. We could have conquered this entire galactic sector 10,000 cycles ago with minimal effort. We chose not to. Do you understand why? Kira looked at the scope of human civilization and felt something like vertigo. Because you learned restraint. Because we learned that being able to destroy everything doesn't mean you should. We spent 10,000 cycles rebuilding our culture around that simple principle. Power without purpose is just destruction. We came back to reclaim what was ours by right, but also to demonstrate that we remember the lessons we learned in blood. The Admiral's expression softened slightly. Your father understood that. He tried to tell your people that some warnings come from those who have survived what you haven't faced. I want you to go back and help them understand. Will you do that? Kira nodded, not trusting her voice. Good. Your transport leaves in 2 hours. Your brother is waiting for you on the other side of the portal. And Captain Thane tell Marcus Thane that Admiral Corbin sends his respect. He was the voice screaming in the wilderness. We heard him even if his own people didn't. The hologram faded. 2 hours later, Kira Thane crossed back through the portal into Krelith space. She was greeted by her brother Ren, who had been waiting at the portal station for days, refusing to leave until she returned. They held each other without words, survivors of a catastrophe that had been entirely preventable. And Kira began to understand what her role would be. Someone had to tell this story. Someone had to make sure the galaxy understood what had happened and why. Someone had to finish what her father started. The evacuation took 63 days. 1.2 million civilians packed into every available transport, streaming back through the portal in an exodus that rewrote the meaning of the word. The humans coordinated the entire operation with methodical precision, providing escorts for civilian vessels, offering medical support for the injured, even supplying food and water to colonies that had depleted their emergency reserves. Kira watched it from the Krelith side of the portal, assigned to help process the returning refugees. She saw families who had built entire lives in those systems now returning with whatever they could carry. She saw children who had been born in the colonies. She saw the elderly, confused and frightened, asking why they had to leave. And she saw Counselor Draven Kael Brought back in restraints aboard a prisoner transport, his political career destroyed by the most catastrophic military defeat in Krelith history. The High Council met in emergency session to determine his fate. Kira was called to testify. She stood in the presentation sphere surrounded by holographic counselors and told them everything. The warnings ignored, the battles lost, the mercy shown, the scale of human civilization they had glimpsed through Admiral Corbin's briefings. When she finished, High Counselor Sephanan spoke with the weariness of someone who had aged a decade in 2 months. Captain Thane, in your professional military assessment, could we have won any engagement against the humans? No, High Counselor. Not with 20 ships, not with 300, not with 3,000. The technological disparity is absolute. The tactical advantage is insurmountable. We were fighting a civilization that spent 200 cycles, perfecting the art of war against an enemy that threatened all sentient life. And then they spent 10,000 cycles refining those capabilities while learning restraint. We never had a chance. Then why didn't they simply destroy us? Kira met his eyes. Because they're not the species they were 10,000 cycles ago. They learned that real strength isn't the ability to destroy. It's the wisdom to know when not to. Draven was sentenced to life imprisonment. His political faction collapsed. The council members who had supported colonization faced censure or forced retirement. The Dominion government that had ignored Marcus Thane's warnings for 20 cycles fell apart within weeks. High Counselor Sephan assumed emergency powers and immediately opened treaty negotiations with the United Earth Coalition. The humans sent an ambassador. Dr. Sarah Marlowe arrived through the portal 3 weeks after the evacuation was complete. She was 80 cycles old now, with white hair and the kind of face that carried 10,000 cycles of experience, like geological formations. She walked with a slight hesitation, as if her body was still adjusting to being awake after millennia in cryosleep. Kira was assigned as her military liaison, the young captain who had witnessed humanity's return escorting the woman who had warned them it would happen. They met in a diplomatic suite on the Dominion capital station. Marlowe looked at Kira with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall and smiled. "You look like your father," she said. Same expression of someone who has learned a terrible truth and now carries the burden of making others understand it. "Dr. Marlowe, Sarah, please. I'm too old for formality. And I'm sorry, Kira. I'm sorry that my warning wasn't clear enough. I'm sorry that your people paid in blood for a lesson I tried to teach gently." Kira felt her throat tighten. "You gave us every chance. We chose not to listen." "Yes, but that doesn't make it hurt less." Sarah moved to the window overlooking the station's docking bays. "I've been asleep for most of human history, since the Exodus. I went into cryosleep hoping I'd never wake up, that you'd all be wise enough to heed our warnings. When the scout ship detected your colonies, Admiral Corbin gave me a choice: stay asleep or wake up and help negotiate the aftermath. I chose to wake up because I felt responsible. I'm the one who left those coordinates as a test. I never thought anyone would actually colonize them." "You underestimated political ambition." "No, I underestimated how quickly fear and greed overcome wisdom." Sarah turned from the window. "I requested you specifically as my liaison because I wanted to meet Marcus Thane's daughter. Will you take me to see him?" Marcus Thane lived in a small research station at the edge of Dominion space where he had retreated after his warnings became prophecy. He was working in his study when Kira and Sarah arrived, surrounded by holographic displays of ancient texts. He looked up as they entered, and for a moment, he simply stared at Sarah Marlowe. The woman from the hologram, the voice that had spoken across 10,000 cycles, now standing in his doorway, aged and real and alive. "Commander Thane," Sarah said quietly, "I owe you an apology and a debt of gratitude. You read our warnings and believe them. You tried to make your people understand. You sent us 47 messages, over 20 cycles, each one more desperate than the last. We heard every word. Admiral Corbin asked me to tell you you were the voice crying in the wilderness, and we honored that voice even when your own people didn't." Marcus stood slowly. his 60 cycles showing in the careful movement. Dr. Marlowe, I spent my entire career studying your civilization, reading your histories, trying to understand why you left. And when I found the Exodus Accords, when I understood what you had become and what you chose to walk away from, I knew we were making a terrible mistake. You tried to stop it. I failed. No, Sarah said firmly. You succeeded in the most important way. Your children survived. Your warnings are now being heard. Your research will be studied for generations. That's not failure, Marcus. That's exactly what we hoped for when we left those warnings. That someone somewhere would understand. They talked for hours. Sarah explained the Devourer War in detail, the 200 cycles of grinding conflict against an enemy that consumed entire species. She described how humanity had militarized every aspect of their civilization, how they had become the most efficient killers the galaxy had ever seen. How when they finally won, they looked at themselves and couldn't recognize what they'd become. The Exodus Accords were signed on the flagship Eternal Vigil, Sarah said. 5,000 human leaders debated for 3 cycles straight. Some argued we should use our power to prevent future threats. Others argued we should simply destroy our weapons and hope for the best. What did you decide? Kira asked. Neither. We chose a third path: withdraw, rebuild our values, but maintain our capabilities under strict ethical guidelines. We would become guardians of our own territory, not conquerors of others. We would remember how to fight, but only to protect, not to dominate. We would build weapons powerful enough to destroy civilizations, and then never use them unless absolutely necessary. Sarah pulled up a holographic display showing the 7 Helios platforms, massive structures each capable of extinguishing a star. We built these, she said quietly, to prove a point to ourselves, that we could create ultimate weapons and choose not to deploy them. We've had them for 10,000 cycles. We've never fired one. That restraint, that choice, made every single day, is what defines us now. Marcus studied the display. The ultimate test of power is the choice not to use it. Exactly. The treaty negotiations took 3 weeks. High Counselor Sefan led the Krelith delegation with Marcus Thane as chief advisor and Kira as military consultant. The humans sent Sarah Marlowe, Admiral Corbin, and Captain Ashford. The terms were generous, far more generous than the Krelith deserved. Medical technology, agricultural advances, defensive systems, educational exchanges, limited access to human scientific databases, all offered freely. The only requirement was simple: respect the sealed sectors. Never again attempt to colonize or militarize human territory. The treaty was signed in a ceremony broadcast across the Dominion. Sarah Marlowe and High Counselor Sefan placed their signatures on the document while Marcus and Kira stood witness. It was a small moment that would reshape galactic politics for generations. Afterward, Sarah asked to speak with Kira privately. They walked through the station's observation dome, looking out at the stars. Sarah moved slowly, her 80 cycles weighing heavily. I'm dying, Sarah said without preamble. I have perhaps 5 cycles left, maybe 10 if I'm lucky. Cryosleep extended my life, but it doesn't stop aging entirely. I wanted to tell you because I have a request. Anything, Kira said. I want you to become the liaison between humanity and the Krelith Dominion. Not officially, not immediately. But I see something in you that's rare. You understand that admitting you were wrong is the first step toward wisdom. Your father spent decades being right, while everyone called him paranoid. You spent weeks being wrong before accepting the truth. That journey from certainty to humility to understanding is valuable. Others need to hear that story. I'm just a military officer. You're the daughter of the man who tried to save his people and the captain who witnessed humanity's return. You're a bridge between what was and what could be. Sarah handed Kira a data crystal. This contains my personal journals from the Devourer War through the Exodus and up to when I entered cryosleep. Everything I saw, everything we learned, everything we tried to teach, I want you to have it, study it, share it, help others understand why we did what we did. Kira took the crystal with shaking hands. Sarah, I don't know if I'm qualified. Neither was I when I recorded that hologram 10,000 cycles ago. I was just a historian trying to prevent future wars. But sometimes that's enough. Sometimes one person speaking truth is all it takes to change the course of history. Sarah smiled. Your father proved that. Even though no one listened in time to prevent conflict, they're listening now. His life's work wasn't wasted. Neither will yours, Bobby. 10 cycles passed. The treaty held. Human ships patrolled the sealed sectors, ensuring the portals remained secure. The Protectorate force, commanded by Admiral Corbin, responded to 3 border conflicts in the region, mediating disputes and preventing wars before they started. The medical technology humanity shared cured 3 diseases that had plagued the Krelith for generations. The agricultural methods increased food production exactly as promised, eliminating hunger in the outer colonies. The defensive systems made Dominion worlds safer. Humanity asked for nothing in return. Marcus Thane completed his memoir. He titled it The Sealed Gateway Warnings, Hubris, and the Mercy of Giants. The book became mandatory reading in every Krelith military academy and government office. His final passage was studied across the Dominion. I spent 30 cycles being called mad. My daughter thought I was paranoid. The council thought I was a fool. But I'd rather be a living fool who was right than a dead genius who was wrong. Some warnings are not threats. They are kindnesses from those who have survived what you have not yet faced. The humans carved their message in 17 languages across 3 galaxies. They wanted us to understand we didn't listen. And 4,800 people died because of our hubris. But billions lived because of humanity's mercy. The book made Marcus famous. He died peacefully in his sleep at 72 cycles with Kira and Ren at his bedside. His last words were simple. Tell them to listen to the warnings, please. Kira promised she would. She was promoted to Admiral 3 cycles after her father's death, given command of the Joint Krelith Human Defense Initiative. Her first assignment brought her to the flagship Valiant's Fury, where Admiral Corbin greeted her with respect. Admiral Thane, Corbin said, gesturing to her new uniform that bore both Krelith and human insignia. Welcome to the Protectorate Force. Your father would be proud. Thank you, sir. I only wish he'd lived to see this. He saw enough. He saw his warnings finally heard. He saw his children survive. He saw his life's work validated. That's more than most visionaries get. Corbin led her through the ship. We've had 43 conflicts in this sector over the past 10 cycles. We've resolved every one without firing a shot. Sometimes overwhelming force is its own deterrent. Sometimes just being present is enough to make people negotiate instead of fight. The Guardian Doctrine, Kira said. Exactly. We don't conquer, we don't impose our will. We simply make it clear that aggression has consequences. Your father understood that. He knew that credibility comes from demonstrated capability combined with consistent restraint. Ren Thane, now 32 cycles old, worked as chief engineer on a joint colony station at the edge of human and Krelith space. The station served as a cultural exchange center. He sent regular messages to his sister. Big sis, you should see what we're building here. Human and Krelith engineers working together on projects neither species could accomplish alone. Dad would have loved this. Everything he warned us about, all the pain and loss it led to this, to cooperation, to mutual respect, to actual peace, not just the absence of war. Kira read that message in her quarters and allowed herself to cry. For her father, who had died knowing he'd been right, but never knowing how right. For the 4,800 who had died learning what should have been learned through wisdom. For the civilization that had been forced to grow up the hard way. Sarah Marlowe died in her sleep at 87 cycles. She left her personal archives to Kira, along with a handwritten letter. Dear Kira, if you're reading this, I finally stopped running from death. 10,000 cycles is enough for anyone. You asked me once why humanity chose to live instead of ruling. I want to give you a final answer. We left because we understood that the greatest service we could provide was absence. Our presence would have prevented younger civilizations from making mistakes, from learning, from growing. We withdrew so you could stumble, fall, and pick yourselves up. The warnings weren't about territory. They were about timing. We didn't want you in our space because you weren't ready yet. Now, after everything you've been through, you're ready. That's why we're offering partnership. You've earned the right to stand beside us through painful experience. Welcome to the next stage of galactic civilization. Kira secured the letter in her personal archives. Someday when other species found other sealed portals, they would need to understand this lesson. 20 cycles after the treaty signing the Venn Collective Thor hierarchy, and Osan Republic joined the Protectorate force as full partners. The coalition that had fought against humanity now fought alongside them, defending smaller civilizations from external threats. The combined fleet resolved 67 conflicts over the next 10 cycles. Not one required firing weapons. Kira commanded the Protectorate's eastern sector from her flagship, the Marcus Thane, a joint Krelith human vessel named in honor of her father. The ship's dedication ceremony was attended by representatives from 7 species. Admiral Corbin, now 68 cycles old and considering retirement, spoke at the ceremony. Commander Marcus Thane spent his life trying to prevent a war he knew was coming. He failed in the short term, but succeeded in the long term. Because of his warnings, because one man refused to stop speaking truth, we have this. Species that were enemies are now allies. Civilizations that fought are now cooperating. That transformation is Marcus Thane's legacy. The ship bears his name because he represents the best of what any species can be, someone who sees disaster coming and tries to warn others even when no one will listen. The Marcus Thane's first mission was responding to a distress call. A small civilization barely achieving interstellar travel was under attack by raiders. The raiders had superior weapons and no compunction about killing civilians. Kira's fleet arrived in system 6 hours after receiving the distress call. The Marcus Thane, flanked by human dreadnoughts and Krelith cruisers, established position between the raiders and their victims. Kira broadcast on all frequencies. This is Admiral Kira Thane of the Protectorate Force. You are engaged in unprovoked aggression against the civilian population. You will cease hostilities immediately and withdraw. You have 1 hour to comply. The raider commander responded with contempt. The Protectorate has no authority here. The Protectorate has authority wherever innocent lives are threatened, Kira replied. We're not asking, we're informing. Withdraw or we will remove you. The raiders, confident in their 12 warships, refused. Kira gave the order. The human dreadnoughts activated their weapon systems. The energy signatures alone made the raider ships' sensors overload. The raiders withdrew within 15 minutes. 0 shots fired. 0 casualties. The small civilization they'd saved sent a transmission. Who are you? Why did you help us? Kira thought about her father, about Sarah Marlowe, about the long journey from ignorance to understanding. We're guardians, she said simply. We help because someone has to, because we remember what it's like to be vulnerable, because we've learned that real strength isn't the ability to destroy, it's the wisdom to know when to protect instead. 30 cycles after the treaty signing, Kira Thane was 58 cycles old. She stood in her ready room aboard the Marcus Thane, preparing to record a message that would be broadcast across known space. It was the anniversary of her father's death and she had been asked to speak about his legacy. My name is Admiral Kira Thane, she began. 30 years ago, I stood in an ancient chamber and read a warning carved in 17 languages. The warning told us not to be there when humanity returned. We ignored it. I ignored it because I thought my father was paranoid, because I thought ancient threats couldn't touch us, because I was young and confident and wrong. The humans returned, and they demonstrated that we had never understood what power truly meant. They destroyed our fleets with ease. Then they showed mercy. They helped evacuate civilians. They offered aid to wounded enemies. They gave us every chance to learn without being destroyed. My father tried to teach us through words. Humanity taught us through demonstration. Both were necessary. I'm recording this for anyone who might find another sealed portal, another ancient warning. Please listen. Don't repeat our mistakes. Don't assume that silence means absence. Don't believe that ancient warnings are irrelevant. Some warnings are kindnesses from those who have survived what you haven't faced. The humans survived the Devourer War. They survived becoming monsters and finding their way back to being guardians. They sealed their territory and warned us away because they wanted us to have time to grow. We didn't give ourselves that time. We rushed in, driven by greed and pride. We paid for it. Thousands died. But from that pain came understanding, partnership, real peace. If you find a warning carved in multiple languages, read every word. If someone tries to make you understand ancient threats, listen. If you encounter a sealed door, consider that it might be locked for your protection. That choice between destroying and protecting, between revenge and mercy, separates civilization from chaos, guardians from tyrants, wisdom from hubris. My father understood that. I hope I've learned well enough to pass it on. Kira ended the recording and transmitted it to the central archives. An alert chimed. New distress signal from an unexplored sector. Kira stood, straightened her uniform, bearing both Krelith and human insignia, and walked onto her bridge. Her crew looked to her expectantly. Krelith, human Ventor, Osan, all working together. Set course for the distress signal, Kira ordered. Full speed! Someone needs help! The Marcus Thane's engines flared to life. The ship turned toward the unknown sector, flanked by escorts from 3 species that had once been enemies. Behind them, the sealed portals glowed softly, their warnings still carved in 17 languages, for anyone wise enough to read them. The humans had returned as guardians, not conquerors, as teachers, not tyrants, as proof that the greatest civilizations were defined not by what they could destroy, but by what they chose to protect. And Kira Thane led her fleet toward the next crisis, with her father's words echoing in her mind. Some warnings are kindnesses. Listen to them. She had listened. She had learned. And now, for the rest of her life, she would pass it on. In his research station at the edge of Krelith, space now converted to a memorial, an educational center, visitors walked through Marcus Thane's preserved study. They read his warnings, studied his research, and learned the story of one man who refused to stop speaking truth. The final exhibit showed the last entry in his personal journal. I spent my life trying to prevent a war. I failed. But my children survived. The warnings are being heard. And perhaps that's enough. Perhaps that's all any of us can do, speak truth. Hope someone listens and trust that even our failures can become lessons for those who come after. To whoever reads this, listen to the warnings. Please, some of them are written in blood. Visitors left that exhibit in silence, understanding that Marcus Thane had succeeded in ways he never lived to see. His warnings had failed to prevent war, but they had succeeded in creating peace. And in the vast space between the sealed sectors and the known galaxy, human ships patrolled the boundaries. They were the guardians who remembered what wolves looked like because they had been wolves once and had chosen to become something better. That choice, that simple, hard daily choice between what they could do and what they should do, echoed forward through time, a legacy that would outlast any empire. The sealed gateway stood silent, its warning still glowing. Humanity had returned as guardians. The Krelith had learned wisdom through fire, and across the galaxy others would hear Marcus Thane's final lesson. Some warnings are kindnesses. Listen to them. The call would always come, and the guardians would always answer.